Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have XYPN founding member Ben Wacek, founder of Wacek Financial Planning, on the show today. Ben has been slowly building his business into the ideal firm for him and his family. Ben works from home and has 3 young kids and wants to prioritize time with them, and is now in the process of actually hiring his father to be a paraplanner at his firm. Ben's faith is very important to him, and he uses biblical principles in his financial planning process. I asked him what makes his process that incorporates faith-based principles different from other financial planners' process, and his answer was really interesting. For any advisor looking to incorporate your personal beliefs into your planning process, whether they be the same Christian beliefs as Ben or not, then you're going to learn a lot from how he's building and running his practice. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/128. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here is my interview with Ben. Hey, Ben, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, Alan. Thanks for having me.
You know, I have to say there are times where I kick myself when I see a name pop up that I haven't had on the show yet, and yours is definitely one of them, because you are one of XYPN's founding members. You've been around since the beginning in April of 2014, and have been running a successful business. So I'm really excited to have you on to talk about sort of, you know, your path and your business and all of that. So thank you for taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here and glad to be part of XYPN these last 3.5 years. It's been an awesome ride.
So give listeners just sort of an overview of your business. Where are you located? Sort of how many clients, your niche focus, that sort of thing. Just sort of lay the foundation and we'll dig into the details as we go.
That sounds great. Yeah, so I started my business right around the time that XYPN launched. So it was June 1st of 2014 is when I launched, and I've got about 35 clients that I work with on an ongoing basis right now. Altogether, I've served over 100 clients since I started my firm. And so I do a lot of hourly and project-based work for clients. I'm based out of Minneapolis, work out of my house. I started, when I started the company, I was working from home and still do that today. Got an office set up in my basement. And so it works out really, really well, where I've got some space separate from my family. And my kind of niche client or target client, I would say, if you look at my website, I'm really focused on just talking about stewardship with clients. I work with a lot of clients who are Christians themselves. That's an important part of the way that I manage my own money with my wife, and just want to help other clients do that as well. So not all of my clients are Christians. Probably about 2/3 of them are. And that's a big part of the clients that I work with. And then kind of within that, I also have a number of clients who are pastors. They have some unique planning opportunities, and then some missionaries as well. Specifically on the hourly side, I've worked with a lot of missionaries through a connection through my uncle, who's a CPA, and he and my aunt were missionaries full-time for a number of years. And so he's referred a number of clients to me as well, and they have a number of unique planning opportunities also.
That is fantastic. And anyone who tells me you can't have a niche, if you can have a niche of working with pastors and missionaries, that, you know, I feel like that is like a group of individuals that you would assume could never pay for financial planning, right? And they're willing to pay you. And so I can't wait to dig into that, just sort of that service model. So give me sort of the rundown on your career. How did you end up, you know, launching your own firm back in 2014?
Yeah, so I graduated from college, Bethel University here in the Twin Cities back in 2006. And I was thankful. I got in a job right away that really did, you know, holistic financial planning, really was focused on the planning. So there was a Raymond James branch, and I was, interviewing at a number of different jobs right out of college. Most of them were more sales roles in the financial services industry. And then this job description came across my email during my senior year, and it was for an associate financial planner working with somebody who had 25 years of experience. They wanted to pay for me to get my CFP. They wanted me to sit in on client meetings and really just help to serve the clients that they had. And so that's where I worked the first 4.5 years that I was in the business. I did get to sit on a lot of client meetings. I got my CFP pretty quickly. Just got to be part of what it looks like to run a business. So much of, what I used when I started my own business were things that I learned those first 4.5 years working in that office. We were served about 70 clients, and our average client had about $1 million invested with us, and really got to be part of everything that went on there. And then I actually my route started to meander a little bit then, where I actually took a year off of financial planning, and I actually enrolled in a full-time leadership development program at the church that went to at that time, still go to today. And the reason for that, I was just getting more and more involved in just leadership positions at my church, and just felt like, financial planning would be there waiting for me. I decided that I wanted to go back to it, but just really wanted to grow in what it looked like to be a leader in a church. And so I knew that regardless of whether that was vocationally or just something I did on the side, I wanted to be involved in church leadership long-term. And so did that program for a year. I actually met my wife through that program as well, which was definitely a plus as well, and really enjoyed that. Then I got back into financial planning, did that for 2 more years for another company where I was a lead financial advisor. So they had another advisor who had left a year before I was there. And so I was given 75 client households that I was in charge of servicing. I had some support staff actually, but really just got to grow in my financial planning skills during those 2 years that I worked there. So then that brought me to 2014. And I really enjoyed the jobs that I worked there. I was never really somebody who felt like I needed to be an entrepreneur. I don't think I'm an entrepreneur by nature or needed to go out on my own. But the firms that I worked for, we had investment minimums of $500,000. And I was having more and more of my friends who were coming to me and just asking if I would give them financial planning advice, and I would, give them an hour of my time, but there was no follow-up, and they felt kind of bad asking follow-up questions just because they knew I wasn't getting paid for it. So really just started to do some research to see, could I actually start a financial planning firm where I wouldn't have to sell products and could serve, people that were closer to my age. And so that's where I just started to talk around. A friend of mine, Sophia Berra, was living in Minneapolis at that time. And I remember I sat down with her, and I actually talked with you too, Alan, I think in January of that year, and just decided, I think I can do this. I think I can make a business out of it. And at the same time, my uncle also that I mentioned earlier, he had been telling me for, a couple of years that I've got all these missionary clients. They need financial planning advice and investment advice, and I don't have anybody to refer them to. Can I refer them to you? And he never could at my prior firms. And so that was an opportunity, for him to do that as well.
Such an awesome story, because I think it's one that, again, a lot of advisors can relate to, that many of us are the accidental entrepreneurs, if you will, that just sort of ended up in entrepreneurship in financial planning simply because there was a client base that we wanted to serve, a type of client that we wanted to serve, and we just weren't able to do it at our previous firms. So I'm actually curious. I want to take one step back just because you mentioned the leadership program through the church. Was that were you paid a salary during that time, or was that, just on your own and just almost like going back to college, like where you're doing a year of leadership training?
Yeah, it was not a paid position. We were also considered an intern at the church. So I was one of 14 people who went through the program that year. And kind of the 3 pillars that they seek to help each person who goes through the program grow in are biblical thinking, Christ-like character, and ministry skills. So really focused on all 3 of those things and just growing. And so we took a number of ministry type classes. We studied the book of Mark for 40 hours in a week. We read through the whole Old Testament and New Testament during the course of the year. We took a systematic theology class. we read a number of books by different authors and had the opportunity to discuss them. And then we were also involved in our church, and we were required to be involved in different ministries and leading in different ministries, actually. I learned so much during that year, not just, about the Bible, but how does a church actually run? Like getting to see the pastors behind the scenes, that they actually do more than just preach for an hour on Sunday. There's a lot of work that goes into being a pastor and just shepherding people and ministering to people and, running different ministries and things like that. And so, that was a big part of the program as well. And so it's a program that our church, still does. There's a small cost to doing it. So most people actually raise some support to go through the program. I raised a little bit of support, but at that time I guess being financially wise, I was single in the first 4.5 years of working, and I had saved a lot of money. And then I also had purchased a house and had 3 roommates that lived in the house. It's a 4-bedroom house. And so they were basically paying for my mortgage. And it was just kind of like, why not do this for a year, while I have the flexibility to do it and don't have a family to support or anything like that.
That's fantastic. I've never heard of a program like that. Was the purpose to become a pastor? Was this like sort of intro to seminary, or was it more of just be a leader in the church?
Our church developed this program really, and there's a Track 1. So Track 1 is just 1 year, and that's for anybody who just wants to grow in their ministry skills, grow in those 3 areas that I mentioned. So not necessarily go into vocational ministry, but then we also have Track 2, which is 2 additional years after Track 1. And that's really for people who want to go into vocational ministry. So somebody might want to plant a church, or they might want to, just go be a pastor at another church. And so it's kind of an alternative to seminary. It's not an accredited program, but seminary is one great option of being trained to be a leader. But if you look at, a number of people who go through seminary, they're not pastors 5 years after, they get through seminary. And one of the main reasons is they just didn't have that training in a church. They knew kind of the head knowledge, but they didn't know how to manage people or to get along with people or to, just really minister to people well. And so that was part of the reason why this program was started, was to kind of do that church-based training inside of a church to get both of those aspects.
That makes sense. It's almost like a residency program where it's more hands-on training.
Yeah, it really is.
What was the final piece that sort of pushed you back into financial planning instead of full-time ministry? Like, was there a reason, I guess, or did you feel like you were able to sort of accomplish both inside of a financial planning firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really was kind of what you said. I missed financial planning. I think financial planning is such a unique and amazing profession in that you get to actually shepherd people, minister to people, make a difference in people's lives, in a deep way, just like you would as a pastor. And talking about money, you learn so much about people's lives. And so I really like talking with people, and I really like the technical side of it though too. Like, it's just something that's very interesting to me, and I miss that. And so, my belief is, wherever you are, it's kind of a ministry. You have an opportunity to make people's lives better, whether that's inside the walls of a church, or whether that's as a financial planner, or as a teacher, or as a construction worker, or whatever it is. You have opportunities to serve other people. And I really feel like that's what we're all called to do. And I felt like I could do that actually better. I had more gifts and passions to do that in financial planning than inside the church, actually. So still very involved in my church. I mean, my wife and I've been going there for 10 years now, and in a number of different leadership positions, leading the financial stewardship ministry. And I'm actually an elder at the church as well, and have been part of leading the men's ministries and all kinds of different things. I've been involved in a small group or Bible study there for a number of years. And so, still feel like I can do both really well, but really enjoy the financial planning piece of my life that I get to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because I've sort of felt the same way about teaching. I really had a passion around teaching and educating, and taught some classes while I was in grad school, and really thought I was going to go the professor route. However, to your point, come to find out you can really make financial planning what you want it to be. That's what I found, was that I could be part educator, part financial planner, in the same way that you saw the ability to sort of blend ministry and personal finance. Because there's so many ways to do financial planning, right? There's so many different sort of pieces to this puzzle. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about sort of your planning process. So, there are some successful firms, Ronald Blue comes to mind, Dave Ramsey, obviously, that have built some very large platforms using, we'll say, integrating faith-based principles is probably the politically correct way of saying it. But I guess what makes your planning process different given this integration with, again, with these faith-based principles and really having that lead the conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think starting out, before part of integrating it, I guess, is first of all, just being really good from a technical standpoint at what I'm doing. And so I don't want to ignore that piece of it and just say, kind of use it more of a sales ploy and say, hey, I'm a Christian financial planner. I use biblical principles, so come work with me. But then I, don't know about new changes happening to tax laws, or I don't know, have a clear strategy on how to use an HSA or when to use an HSA. And so I really want to be an expert in financial planning. And I think it kind of starts there, just like anybody would. But I just wanted to start by saying that because I think that that's really important for somebody who wants to, incorporate their faith or be a faith-based financial planner. And then as far as my process goes, I would say it looks very similar to how other people would run a business, just really wanting to first learn about the person. What are their goals? What are they hoping to accomplish? But then I think it's some of the conversations that we have that would make it, more faith-based, gives me opportunities to incorporate, my faith into what I do. And so, I think just by sharing a couple examples is a good way to demonstrate that. So this morning, actually, I was just talking with a new client, and she was just talking and asking me, just saying, I really don't want money to become something that I'm so focused on in life. I don't want it to become an idol. I want to have God be in the right place in my life, and I don't want money to take that place in her life. And so we were able to talk through just, what does that look like? What are some ways, some practical tips even that, you can do that to keep money in the right place. And so, a few things that we talked about are, one is just, set an annual giving goal that stretches you and that's uncomfortable and that might be sacrificial, sacrificing other parts in your life. Another thing that we talked about was the idea of a graduated tithe. And so it was really important. She wanted to give, 10% of her income. This year she was giving, even more than that. But there's a pastor, actually used to be a pastor out of Minneapolis named John Piper, who talked about the graduated tithe, where he and his wife, anytime that they would get a pay raise, he would not only naturally, if you're giving the same percentage, you'd give more, but he increased the percentage that he gave every time that he got a pay raise, just to make sure that, those wants in life didn't start to feel like needs. So just, again, to try to keep money in its proper place. She also actually just talked about today how a turning point for her was she realized that her mortgage was more than, what she was giving, and just felt like for her, she wanted to be able to, give more than she was giving to anybody else, essentially giving to God more than she was giving anywhere else. And so she's increased her giving above what her mortgage payment is on a monthly basis. So there's not like a right or a wrong in doing that, but I feel like even people are expecting to have some of those conversations with me around just biblical principles because of the way that I kind of hold myself out to be a faith-based financial planner or a Christian financial planner.
Yeah. And I know, they say never involve, politics, money, or religion, right? Those are the things we don't talk about. And you certainly don't talk about them with your clients. Heaven forbid you tell your client you're a conservative and they're a liberal, right? Because, we've sort of, our country, our culture, I guess, and I'll blame it partially on social media, but we've sort of moved in this, like, there's no way that two people who don't view life the same way could possibly work together, which is absurd. And, I think a lot of people realize that. However, you're really putting that front and center. And I think there are a lot of clients that probably very much appreciate the ability to share those values without judgment. And, because I can imagine there are a lot of planners, especially those that are just not used to the conversation. The easiest thing to cut in a person's budget is their tithe. I can get 10% of a person's money back to be able to close the gaps. Fantastic. Let's do that. When you're in CFP school, that's what you do, right? You go through the budget, you hack it up. And if they're tithing, you get rid of it. And if they're eating out, you get rid of that. right? We take all the things that actually matter to people. But that's not going to work with a client that's really their focus, is that's sort of a non-negotiable at times. And being willing to say, you know what, financially, maybe it's the right decision to not tithe for a year, but that's not going to be okay. That's not what needs to happen right now. You're going to continue to tithe, and we have to make other sacrifices for that. So, it's why we pound the table so hard for having a niche. But in this instance, more than just having a niche, is being willing to say, this is who I am and the type of advisor I am, and in many ways, the conversations I'm willing to have with you, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think those are really good points, Alan. And I think the thing about this, though, is don't involve maybe faith in the work that you're doing. But I feel like the Bible also does talk so much about money that if somebody has those convictions, that it kind of needs to be part of their financial plan, because there is so much that's talked about, in the Bible. And so I have found from a number of people that it's just really important. They want to talk about that. But I'm also, careful not to tell somebody that the way that they should do it because this is what the Bible says. And so, I really view my role in the relationship. I talk about stewardship with my clients. I am not the steward of their money. So, and the idea of stewardship is that God owns the money. So God owns the money. They're the ones who are called to steward it. God has entrusted this money to my clients to steward, not to me to steward. But my role is really to come side of them as more of that counselor or coach to help them, give them perspective, give them that technical expertise, give them, I've studied the Bible a lot and what it has to say about money. So be able to speak into those areas, but I'd never want to make somebody feel guilty because what they are or aren't doing. I feel like my job, again, is just to come along as that counselor or coach to help them as they ask me to.
So one of the important things I think it's fair to mention is actually the email exchange you and I were going back and forth, just about being on the show. There's always the concern of like, is it okay if I don't want to push my beliefs on other advisors? And the point here from your perspective and what you expressed me via email is this is not about like why advisors need to be a faith-based advisor and use Christian-based principles. It's really about that you can do this in whatever your belief system is and wherever you're coming from, that you truly can integrate who you are and what you believe into your planning process, whether you're trying to build, again, leveraging faith-based principles, or you're coming at it from a different angle, and maybe your focus is on preserving the environment. It's okay to be that person with your clients and to have those conversations, because again, I think you'll find that not a lot of advisors are willing to have a conversation like this with their clients. And I like I said, I think it's awesome because it allows you to work with clients that you're going to get along with and be able to really connect with. And you can do so without, feeling like you're preaching to them. You can really walk with them through the process and through the situation that they're in.
Yeah. And it really does allow you to go to even another level, I think, with those clients when you have that, shared faith or shared understanding or shared goals of, why are we even doing this planning? What's the purpose of, why we're doing this? And I think that's allowed me just, first of all, to really enjoy working with all of my clients because we're able to have those deep conversations. And then secondly, I think just for business, it's been good because I have a strong retention with my ongoing clients. I, offer an ongoing monthly subscription model, monthly retainer model. And, in 3.5 years, I've only had, 2 people who have ever dropped off of that. And I have 35 right now. So I feel like it has caused a lot of retention just because there is more, it's more than just planning. It's a relationship and it's more than just the technical. Like they really are viewing me as like that counselor or coach. And so even if they feel like they can implement it on their own, they value just being able to talk openly and get my perspective on some of these things that they might be wrestling with on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, that is the highest retention rate I think I have heard of an advisor using monthly subscriptions. That's just fantastic. And like I said, I think a lot of it has to do with being able to go a step further with your client. And we've talked before, and there are advisors out there, my old boss being one of them, is trying to figure out this sort of world of financial therapy, right? Like how do you bring in a therapist to have a conversation with a client and maybe do some counseling or therapy? But what we found of working with therapists and what I have found of having a therapist of my own and working alongside therapists is that being a counselor, being a therapist, the training is all about being able to ask the next question. And I wonder if some of your leadership training helped provide some of that as well, is really being able to ask the next question and dig a little deeper. And, because no one, I don't know, we joke sometimes about like, when do you want to retire? 65. Okay, we just put that in the software. It's like, now, wait a minute. Like, why 65? What does that mean to you? And it's something about sort of that training that counselors have, I think, that allows them to go deeper and really get to the root of the anxiety and the reasons, which again, I think you're leveraging as well in your practice, is that just being able to really uncover what people care about and what they're passionate about, instead of just, I want to tithe 10% and then move on. You can actually have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I think the questions that I ask are a really important part of the work that I do for my clients as well. And so even the types of questions would be different that I would ask as a faith-based, financial planner, as a Christian financial planner, than others would. I do often ask, actually, just the client I was talking with this morning, went through the, Kinder life planning questions. I feel like those are still great questions to get at the heart of what's going on. But, other questions might be asking, like, how much is actually enough? If they're accumulating money, going back to the, conversation I talked about earlier, where money is not becoming something that is becoming an idol or a god in life, of, okay, well, what is that amount then where you're going to get there and you're going to say, I don't need any more to reach the goals and the things that I feel like, God has called me to do here on earth. And so the questions, are very important to the conversations that I'm having with people, to the work that I'm doing, the planning that I'm doing. Just another example was I had a client who had lost their job, and they were a little bit older, and they were deciding, I still got to earn some more money, in figuring out what they should do. And they were looking at some jobs that, paid pretty good, but they weren't, maybe as interested in. But we were just able to have a conversation about, what are your passions? What are the gifts you feel like God has given to you? And then showing them with the numbers, like, you actually don't have to earn as much money as you think you do in order to be able to meet your goals. And I feel like going into that conversation, a job had just been lost, anxiety was high, but then coming out of the conversation, they just did feel a lot of peace of like, wow, I can actually pursue something that I'm really excited about. I don't have to earn as much income as I did. And again, it's that melding of not just saying you should do this because you want to, but the numbers actually support it too. So it's the combination of those two that I think is just really valuable in counseling people and providing them with just wisdom and insight.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. We should have someone on sometime to talk about encore career and that concept, because if it's amazing the difference between a financial plan when you have someone that approaches a certain age and just switches to making enough money to pay their living expenses. That, right now we run financial plans of, okay, they're going to work till 65 and never earn any more money. But if instead from 60 to 70, for instance, they sort of have this encore career where they're making $40,000 a year, which is, a third of what they used to make. However, they're, earning enough to not have to take money out of their retirement accounts. It's amazing the difference that makes. Every year you delay taking money out is, that compounding really does matter. But it also, to your point, you can actually maybe stop a little earlier than you thought you could. So a topic for another day.
Yeah, I know Mitch Anthony talks a lot about that too. He writes a lot about that and talks a lot about that, who spoke at the XYPN conference. And it is something where work is also a really good thing. I think that just even from, again, my understanding of biblical standpoint, like, we were created to work. That's part of the reason that we were created. And it's not a bad thing to do it. We just need to find work that we're passionate about and that, helps other people. And so I think when we find those things, work becomes really enjoyable, and people find that, wow, I could do this for a long time because I'm helping other people and I really enjoy actually what I'm doing. It's not just to put food on the table so that I can do the things that I actually want to do.
Yeah, that's also a great point that, and I think that comes from some of the older generations, especially like my grandparents. If I think about their generation, they worked to, like I said, to put food on the table, and they weren't passionate about their job necessarily. They just did it because it was a good job and it paid well. And they said they were building a pension. Come to find out, maybe not, but that they had this sort of long-term financial security. And it is different than in this day and age where we do have more freedom and flexibility to do the things that we love and to do a job that we're passionate about and not just one that we feel like we have to do. So talk to me a little bit about sort of the launch and build of your financial planning firm. So I know you had pulled together some numbers around income and expenses. So you launched in, you said June of 2014. So, I'm assuming you had just a stellar year and made $1 million in that first year, right? Because we all do. So how did that first year go for you from an income and expense perspective?
The first year, I broke it up just for 2014. So those first 7 months, really, my total income was about $9,000. I actually don't have clear expense numbers from that year. I've got them for each year since then. But I would guess, if I had to guess, maybe around $12,000 to $15,000 that first year. And so did, lose money the first year. I ended the year with five ongoing clients. So anytime I talk about clients, this will always be ongoing clients. But again, served a number hourly, not as much hourly work that first year, but got 5 ongoing clients that I was working with.
So what was the service model that you first launched with? Sort of what did you, what was the original vision for how you were going to be working with clients?
It was always kind of this 3-pronged approach. So 3 service models. So one, I always wanted to offer hourly financial planning. I will say now my hourly rate it's still really low. Right now it's $120 an hour is what I charge. But when I started, it was $80 an hour. So I was very, very low on what my hourly rate is, but definitely built some confidence doing that. And I think I switched to $120 like about a year after launching my business. And so I always offered that. Then I offered a monthly subscription model. When I started, again, rates were very low. $50 a month is what I just charge, a flat monthly fee for anybody who worked with me on an ongoing basis. And then I did start with AUM. So I did get a couple AUM clients right away, just some friends and even like parents of friends. And so that definitely helped a lot as from an income standpoint early on. Having a few of those AUM clients, I charged 1%, per year on the first 500,000, and then it went down from there. Offering those 3 things. And I guess something that's probably a little bit unique too is that I offer to anybody just to do a comprehensive financial plan. I'll charge by the hour, and I don't ask them to commit to an ongoing relationship until after I've presented that initial financial plan. So just like this morning, I had that meeting. It was about a 2-hour meeting, presented the whole financial plan and, gave her the option, you can choose to work with me on an ongoing basis. The price for her was $100 a month on an ongoing basis, or you can just choose to implement this on your own. And then I give them a 2-month discount on the initial fee if they continue with me on an ongoing basis. And so the price would have been reduced by $200 for that initial financial planning fee to work with me on an ongoing basis.
This is always a conversation with advisors on when, how do you position a relationship? And I think some advisors get caught in this like, okay, we're going to do financial planning for a year and then we'll sort of see how it goes from there. And what they find is when you position the relationship as a 1-year relationship, your clients actually hear that. And after a year, they tend to drop off if that's how you positioned it from the beginning. And so I'm always advocating for, hey, financial planning should be a long-term relationship. So position it as such. And you've sort of taken a similar route, but you're saying that you do the comprehensive financial plan first and then let them decide, hey, does it make sense to commit to something long-term? Because even though we don't use contracts, when you ask a client to commit for a relationship long-term, they're not going to sign up for that unless they like you and trust you and are committed to that. So it's a cool way to sort of interview, but you're getting paid. So that's nice.
Yeah. And I would say I probably get, like I said, a lot of people don't end up going on with me, but I think then the ones who do end up moving on with me, that's probably part of the reason I have such good retention with them too, is because they're saying, no, I really want to stay with you long term. I have this financial plan. I could choose to do it on my own, but I think I need you to do it. And so that's probably part of the reason that I have the higher retention rate as well, I would guess.
Sure. No, it's really awesome screening. In a way, it's upfront revenue, right? Getting a couple grand for writing a financial plan is awesome. You're providing great value. There's no question. And then, again, they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them and figuring out, hey, is this a good long-term relationship for me? So I think that's a really cool way of doing it and positioning that to your clients. I know a couple of years ago, we had Carl Richards speak at XYPN 15, actually, the first conference. And he said at his old firm, he actually did the financial plan just like you do, but he did it for free. And then people would sign up. Now, he was under an AUM billing, so it was 1%. And so he didn't start charging until after the presentation of the plan. which I never loved because of this. When you're starting a business,
you need some revenue up front for that plan. And it's a lot of work. I feel like you probably, if you're not charging for it, you're likely to not do as high quality of work, maybe just because you're not getting paid for it. So I think it's better for the client actually too, to pay something because they know they're getting your best and you're going to do great work for them.
So 2014, it sounds like you may have gone backwards just a little bit, which is to be expected in your first year financially. Were you married at the time? I mean, and if so, was your spouse working and have an income, or were you still living on savings at this point?
So it was challenging. I was married at that time. We actually had a 6-month-old daughter. Lena, our oldest, will be turning 4 actually in December. Now we've got 2 more since then. So we could talk more about that too. It's been kind of chaotic around our house since I started the business. But yeah, I had a 6-month-old. My wife at that time was actually working 15 hours a week at our church. And so her income was not significant. I mean, thankful, her income really helped a lot. So, it wasn't a lot, but it still helped. But yes, we were living on savings. I actually did also borrow $20,000 from actually my uncle, who's a CPA. So that got us started. And then I actually, I don't remember if it was the first or second year, ended up taking $10,000 out of my Roth IRA as well, contributions that had been made in the past. And so, not things that as a financial planner I loved to do. I don't like the idea of taking on debt. I don't like the idea of taking from retirement accounts, but really saw that, long term, this was something that I wanted to invest in. I felt like, it would work. And I'm thankful. I mean, now my wife doesn't work anymore at all. And we're able to meet our monthly cash flow needs. And even we're in the process of paying my uncle back. And so, it took a while to get to that point, but we're there, and I'm thankful for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And like I said, it's tough. It's tough to take on debt. I am so risk taking. Any Metrica or Riskalyze or anything like that. I mean, I'm always at the top of risk taking, but I don't like debt. I will take all the risk in the world with my money, but I hate taking risk with someone else's money. And I know a lot of financial planners are that way. So, but you're starting a business, and sometimes it's necessary. And if you really believe in it and believe you have a solid business model, you'll be able to pay it back, then it's not a bad decision to go that route.
Again, even from a biblical standpoint, it was difficult for me to do that. And I don't know if I would always advise my clients to take on that debt. I would recommend that they're very cautious. But my thought also was, with the debt, again, because I worked early on, I had, the ability to save quite a bit amount into retirement accounts. And so I felt like I was in good shape as far as those, where I didn't have to save a significant amount into our retirement accounts. And I also, felt like worst case scenario that could happen is the business doesn't work out and I would have to take some, more money out of the Roth IRA to pay that off. But I still felt like long term, I could go back, I could work for another company. It wasn't going to, cause our family to go into bankruptcy or anything like that. I felt comfortable with the worst case scenario of that situation. So understanding what that was, I felt comfortable with the debt. If we hadn't had those retirement accounts, or, if the situation had been different, maybe I wouldn't have started a business. But again, just considering all those things and praying through it, talking about it with my wife, we were both on board. And that was so important too, that Becca, my wife, was 100% on board. She was so supportive and continues to be so supportive of me starting the business and allowing it to grow to what it has today.
So that was sort of year one. How did that so what did year two look like? So going into 2015, I guess year 2 and year 3 sort of, did you see the growth that you were expecting to see or hoping to see to be able to keep the business moving forward?
Yeah. So it's been kind of slow, steady growth all throughout the business. So 2015, total revenue was $44,000. In 2015, expenses that year were about $11,000, not including my income during that time. Basically, I was able to pay myself about, $33,000 my first full year in business. So I was a year and a half into starting the business. First full year in business was that amount. Had 17 clients at the end of 2015. So added about a client a month because I was at 5 after the first one. And then in 2016, second full year in business, total revenue almost exactly $70,000. Expenses jumped up to $20,000. Was the total basically of that I was able to pay myself that year was about $50,000. And I had 28 clients at the end of 2016.
So just out of curiosity, what was the jump in expenses that year to go from 11 to 20,000?
There were a couple of things. So one is that I think E&O insurance, for example, I had to pay like upfront at one point, and then it became a monthly expense later on. And so like that just happened to be in that year was a big part of that. I started using eMoney. When I started using it, it was $325 a month. Now with the XYPN discount, it got discounted to $225, but that was, almost an extra $4,000 per year for that. I include like all my conference travel. I went to, I think, a couple more conferences that year, just the travel for those. There wasn't a hire or anything like that during that year that caused it to jump up.
Well, I mean, just the money adds almost $4,000 of that. That makes sense. And it's very normal, right? Expenses are going to go up over time. I was just curious if there was a big shift, but it sounds like a few, natural pieces. So you went from making no money in 2014 to making $5-ish thousand in 2015, making maybe a little over 50 in 2016. So then where do things stand for 2017 now?
So I'm on track. My revenue will be right around, I think, 95,000 for this year, unless I get another. That's kind of the lower end. It could be a little higher if I were to get another client, but probably right around 95,000 it will be for this year. And then expenses haven't gone up a lot this year. So I'm thinking about 22,000 is what there will be this year. And about 35 clients is what I'm at right now, probably a few more before the end of the year.
That's awesome. So it really has just sort of been, steady growth and just year over year. And this is why we tell advisors that the number one thing that you can't avoid is time. And it just takes time. Too often we see advisors, start a firm and in that first 6 months, they need to be at 40,000 a year of income. And it's, many times not realistic. Some advisors can do it. Some have sort of a natural network, or they have a way of doing that. But for the most part, this is a pretty typical, what we've seen from our benchmarking surveys and all that. Like, this is a pretty typical growth pattern, and going over the next couple of years is really when I suspect you're going to be able to breathe a little bit and really crush it, because the pressure will be off a little bit.
Yeah, I'm really thankful, for the growth there too. And talked about this earlier, but for me, having 3 young kids now and, working from home, and we've also got a situation where my wife doesn't work for pay anymore, but she's a caregiver for her sister who has an autoimmune disease. And so just the flexibility that the work provides me, and I probably only work, 40 to 45 hours a week tops. I would, someday like to work more hours than that. But in this stage in life, I feel like I probably couldn't have handled growth much more than what I've had. And so I'm so thankful for the growth that I have had and to be in the place today that I am, while not, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. It really has been a lifestyle practice for me, even in this growth mode. And so I'm really grateful, for what it's been, and that in some ways that it hasn't grown faster, because I just don't think that I would have been able to handle that growth and meet my just needs for my family.
Yeah. So tell me about like your hiring sequence. Have you hired anyone or had anyone working under you up until this point?
Yeah. So I actually had a summer intern work with me this past summer. So he actually reached out to me already. It was like last November, I think. So he started in June. So it was like 6 months before he wanted to start. He was a finance major at the University of Minnesota. He was a friend of mine from church, actually. So he's, 10 years younger than I am, a college student. He was in his senior year right now. But yeah, just said, could that be a possibility? And I kind of talked to him some more through a couple of conversations, and then just crunching some numbers. It was important to me that I wanted to be able to pay him something. And so, crunched some numbers and decided that we could do that. So he decided to work with me. And I think that it was really helpful. It was a win-win. I know he took a ton from it. He loved just what he got to do. He asked a ton of just really good questions, learned a lot about financial planning, and got to sit in most of my client meetings and things like that over the course of the summer. But it was beneficial for me too. I had him working on a lot of projects that I've been wanting to get to, for a long time, and just hadn't gotten around to, getting them getting to them, just even organizing different files and making sure that we had all the right information for each of the clients and they were all, categorized in CRM correctly. So projects like that. He also wrote a couple of blog posts for me, but probably we found out over the course of the summer that he was a good writer, but he wasn't, I guess, most excited about that. Amazing in Excel. Like he just loved Excel and really got like the concepts of how to take something that maybe I was thinking and, hey, how can we create a spreadsheet out of this? And so he left over the course of the summer just with a number of spreadsheets that I still use that for client reviews where I'm okay with Excel. I'm adequate, but used to, if I was doing a student loan analysis and doing some scenarios, I would type those out in Excel and have, a number of different scenarios, but would kind of have to recreate them each time, where he just worked his Excel magic and, put it together where I just enter, the inputs and it spits out the analysis. And then it's also in a way that can be presented to clients. So really the work that he did lived beyond him as well. And I'm still using those things in my practice today.
Yeah, I know a lot of advisors are hesitant to bring on an intern because oh, well, what am I going to get out of it? I'm going to spend a lot of time. I don't have time for an intern. And I'm like, I feel like if it's structured properly, then an intern really can come in and they're going to get a ton of benefit, but they really can benefit you without it being about hey, let's have them scan a bunch of paperwork or whatever.
Yeah. And I think it took us, probably half the summer to figure that out. He's really good at Excel and not just good at entering the numbers, but thinking through the concepts and how can I make this even better? Or if I'm using another Excel spreadsheet, how can I take this a step further? And so he really took initiative where I didn't have to just constantly be looking over his shoulder and making sure he was, doing his work. He did a great job. And I think the other thing that hiring an intern did for me personally is just realize how much I enjoy working with somebody else on the business. Just talking through different client cases, hey, this client asked about this. What do you think they meant by this? Running different ideas. I feel like it made me a better financial planner just because he asked a lot of questions about the advice that I was giving and why I recommended this or not that. And so helped me to even improve my communication and how I communicate different strategies and topics and things like that. So yeah, for me, it made me see, even looking to the future, that working with somebody else is something that I would really like to do long term.
Yeah. So are you looking to hire now or maybe part-time? Sort of what are you thinking structure over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So that's kind of a fun question too. So my next hire would be kind of a paraplanner type of role. So would like to hire somebody who's working with me on an ongoing basis. The internship, I think, was great, but I feel like towards the end of the summer, we were really doing our best work and he was doing his best work and then it was done. And so really want to work with somebody on more of a part-time basis, but ongoing, somebody who can be putting together financial plans for me more behind the scenes. As I was, just thinking about who that person might be, that person probably is actually going to be my father. So my dad is going to be, the plan is at this point in January, he will be coming on and joining me on a part-time basis. So he's actually been an engineer all of his life. He's 60 years old now, and he's always had an interest in personal finance. He's the one who got me interested in it at our church. He's the person, growing up who would meet with people who were having financial difficulty or wanted to talk through some topics. And so always been a passion of his. And he's actually been, over the last year, taking CFP classes. So he finished his CFP classes and will be taking the test in March. And so the plan is that he's going to work with me on just a part-time basis. He still is working full-time, but is looking at going part-time as an engineer. So I know that there's risks in working with family, but he's just a very analytical guy. I feel like he'll do great in this role. And I think, he could just be a great addition to the firm. And also I've been, just as I learn more about hiring and, how to do it and how long to expect people to stay with you. I mean, it sounds like if you can get somebody to stay with you for 3 years, that's kind of a win. It's in most cases. Exactly. And so my thought on there is, if he really wants to do this for 10 more years is what he said. And so I feel like that again, things could change, but I feel pretty confident that we can have a good partnership and he can bring a lot of value to me and I can help him. Again, going back to what we were talking about before, doing something that you're passionate about. He can do it on a part-time basis. He can work from home. He can work from his cabin if he wants. He can work from wherever, he wants to. Can be something that he's just going to love, I think, doing for the next 10 years as well. And so I think it's really a win-win. I'm excited about it. We can maybe reconnect in a couple of years and see if it was a success or not. But I'm confident that it's going to be great. He's going to really fill a need that I have right now, just as I get busier with client work and being able to do some of that work. And then I think he could really grow into an advisor role too. And also could, he's 60 years old, has a network of people who are close to retirement, and maybe he becomes more of an expert on those matters in the firm and can bring on some clients that way.
Yeah, I can tell you, I work with my mother, my brother, and my wife. We can talk family. Yeah, I know there are a lot of folks that have had challenges with it. I have seen it is very different to work. All three of those relationships have very different dynamics. Keeping in mind, I work with my older brother who is like hyper competitive and like was always the alpha male of the family. So I was always worried about these like different, I shouldn't say I was always worried. I think I should have been worried. I think I wanted to bring in people that I really trusted, and I was never worried about my mom stealing our money. So like my mom does some of our books and some of the bill pay and things like that. Like I just wasn't worried about that. I knew my brother, I knew his integrity and I knew his leadership capabilities and all of that. So I was excited for him to come onto the team. Now, that was actually a bit of a blind process because I didn't tell the team we were brothers. We have different last names thanks to having different dads. And so I didn't tell them until he was hired that we were related. Who would know Raul Dominguez, right? Was my brother, but and then my wife runs Advice Pay. And so it's fun, I think. If you can make it work, there are a lot of honest conversations that have to happen around boundaries and responsibilities and who does what. I know every now and then my wife will say, why don't you just do it? And we'll pause and she goes, oh, that's right. It's my job. Like, because, it's sort of annoying for your husband to like task you with things. And I've had to learn how to not just like task her with things, like have a conversation about it. So it can absolutely be done. I think it's a ton of fun to be able to work with your family because I think I get a lot more interaction. I see my brother a lot more now than I used to. So I think it's great. It comes with its own complexities. To your point, maybe they stick around a little longer and you trust them and all of that. So I'm excited. That's a really cool way of doing it. I haven't heard of very many advisors that have hired their parents. So
yeah, I think it'll be interesting. My dad and my uncle that I talked about, who's a CPA, and then my brother and cousin used to go on fishing trips every summer. We called them our annual business trips, but we always kind of joked about starting a company and calling it Wacek, 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 and Wacek. And now my uncle is the CPA and I work closely with him on a lot of client cases. And now my dad is coming on. And so we just got to get my brother and my cousin on board and we'll realize our dreams from years ago.
That's awesome. Yeah, that would be fun. One thing I can't let you off the hook on is the fact that you said you started the business with a 6-month-old and now you have 3 children. I have 1 and I can't figure out what to do with him sometimes. So how has that been? You work from home for 1, and 2, just like having 3 small kids. Like, how are you balancing those 2 things, with work and life and being sure that family and the business are both taken care of?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first of all, it's just making sure I know where my priorities are. And so family really does come first for me, but my business is really important too. So it's not like I just don't care about my business. It's going to take care of itself. Because that's not true. It does take a lot of work and it takes time to build it. But at the same time, the business is not what I am ultimately, finding my identity from. It's not what I'm finding the most fulfillment in. And so recognizing that I need to have boundaries. And so, one of those, for example, is just weekends. I don't work on weekends. There's, some exceptions to that. Like if we did a family activity on a Friday and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to work a little bit on Saturday. But for the most part, if it's a normal week, I'm not touching work at all on Saturdays or Sundays. And so that's been a good boundary to have as far as that goes. And then, it is working from home can have its challenges. And I've talked to some people who it's very difficult for them to get work at home. I think because our kids have grown up like that, growing up with that. They are just know that when dad goes downstairs, he's working. And so they're not pounding at the door. They're not trying to get at me. If I'm around during the day and I'm not at a client meeting or something, I come up for lunch. So I have lunch with the family every day. I'm able to, this morning, just drove my daughter to preschool and she was excited. I told her on the way there, do you know what tomorrow is? Tomorrow's the weekend. What does that mean? And she's like, Daddy doesn't have to work at all. So like they get that, and they'll ask me, do you have a client meeting today, Dad? Where are you going? And so it's fun. Like they get to, it's just normal for them, I guess. And so it has worked out well. I think if it did get to a point where, ever they were just wanted to get downstairs or they were having a really difficult time, every time that I would come up for lunch and have to go back downstairs, that they would have a hard time with it. I would have to look at getting an office. But to this point, I mean, the flexibility that it's provided for me to have a great office right out of the basement and not have a commute. I have a couple conference rooms that I rent out that are in the neighborhood where I can meet with clients or I'll go to their homes. And so to this point, there hasn't been a need to have an office space, but at some point in the future, that may have to be the case. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I've said this on the show before, but what we have seen, especially from like Team XYPN, we're all work from home before we open the Bozeman office, and kids get it. Like kids understand when you say Daddy's working, they understand. Even my 3-year-old, when he was 2.5, like, oh, Daddy, you calling the team? And they interact and like they just get it, right? That's how they grew up. It's about conversations with your partner. Many times spouses can be the ones that sort of disregard and just sort of like, and I can't tell you how many times we've seen significant others, in the room. It's like on that TV, on that thing where the guy was on cable news live and his child comes in the back door behind him. Anyway, it was a funny video. That's what we see is like the spouse will come in the door. And that is about honest conversations and saying, hey, when the door's closed, I've got to be working. And if you need me, we need a way of communicating without you opening the door in the middle of a client meeting. But if you're on the same page there, then it really can be awesome to work from home. I've worked from home pretty much my whole career until about 3 months ago when we opened the office. And so now I have to go in and act, and because everyone else is there. But it is kind of cool. But yeah, it's a crazy balance that you're going through and just learning. And as the kids age, I feel like the balance changes because the needs change, from holding the baby to going to soccer practice, right? Like just as they get older.
Or just, driving to preschool this morning. I mean, that's something, and I'm not saying it's always easy. Like you said, it is a lot of conversations with Becca and figuring out what the expectations for both of us are. And, last night is an example. It was like I had this client meeting this morning that I had, and I, wasn't quite done with it. And so I said, hey, I'll put the girls to bed tonight, but then I'm going to have to go work for a while. And so I worked until midnight last night. But it's great because then I got up this morning and drove the girls to preschool and got to spend some time with them and have breakfast with them before I, had my client meeting. And so it's a balance between enjoying that flexibility, but also making sure I have my time where I can focus and work. And just because I'm home doesn't mean I can always be pulled, to something else or something that needs to be done around the house or a kid needs to be taken somewhere.
Absolutely. So I guess what's on the roadmap for you? What are you hoping over the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months? Any major changes or anything major that you're going to be taking on other than, of course, adding your father to the firm? Anything else sort of on the roadmap for you?
One big thing that I'm kind of wrestling with as I get closer to the point where now my just recurring revenue from AUM and monthly subscription is meeting our cash flow needs without that, project or hourly based work. I feel like I do have a little bit more freedom to dream and plan about where do I want to take the business. And one thing that keeps coming to my mind as I think through that, just the passion that I have is trying to figure out a way to serve even more people. So increase the amount of people who are served, but potentially even do that. Well, a couple of ways that I can think to do that. So one is to have a lower price point service model. And as I think about that, somewhere between what I'm doing right now and like a Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University class. So I'm still trying to figure out what that exactly looks like, where it would have, some, interaction with a certified financial planner, whether that's me or if I, my dad or hire somebody else to do that, but then also leveraging kind of instead of a one-to-one, a one-to-many. So whether that's through video calls or whether that's through just, materials that I put together or group webinars where people can still ask questions, just trying to figure out what that is, just because I see a huge need for the service that I'm providing. But I also feel like for some people that I'd like to serve, even my low prices are above what, if they're making $40,000 a year, it's difficult to, be paying over $100, a month or something like that. So that's kind of one way that I'm just kind of starting to dream about and think about what that could look like. And another way that I've thought is potentially focusing more on pastors, actually. So right now I've got about 5 clients who are a pastor, but I haven't done any marketing specifically to pastors. I feel like there's opportunity there. It's funny, I talked about serving missionaries. I did my very first blog post was like 9 starter financial planning tips for missionaries. And still, if you Google financial planning for missionaries, that blog post is the number 1 hit on Google. It has been for like the last 2 years. And I didn't do anything to try to do that. I was just like Googling that one day, and it's like, whoa, it really surprised me. But there's just not anybody's doing financial planning for missionaries. And pastors, there's a few more people who are doing something like that. But I feel like there's just a need there. The pastors that I've met with, they're not always, great with their money. They don't understand it. They want to, take good care of it, but they just haven't taken the time to set up a budget or really know what's going on with their finances. And plus, they've got unique opportunities with housing allowance, and there's some Social Security things and things like that. And so I've thought about potentially making that more of a focus and actually advertising that a little bit more, with the idea that if I can help more pastors, they're helping a lot of people naturally. And so that would be another way that I could impact more people and just help them experience really financial freedom around, just their finances, where they have to worry less about it and can focus more on the things that they really care about and just make good decisions too. I feel like I talk to so many clients who are just good-meaning people who just have these products that they should never have. They just don't make sense in their situation. And so just providing education in those areas as well. So those are, just as I think about, the next year or even the next 3 years, those are some things I really want to try to just tackle and get clarity on is how can I continue to expand the reach of the amount of people that I'm reaching with solid faith-based financial planning advice.
Yeah, I think this is such a great conversation. And I know we have a lot of members of XYPN that are having this conversation around, like, how do we expand the services? Because we know one-on-one relationship, it has a cap. It has a cap somewhere around 100 clients per advisor. And we don't have, if all Americans that could afford financial planning actually went out and tried to hire one, we don't have nearly enough advisors on 100-to-1 ratio. And then 2, there are a lot of clients that simply can't afford financial planning and not at the level that is required to build a sustainable business at 100-to-1 client to advisor relationship. And I don't know if it's a Dave Ramsey style program, like you said, or it's more content like maybe a Susie Orman or a Farnoosh who has a big media platform. Is that but there has to be somewhere in between group coaching or something, I don't work out with a physical trainer every day, right? I go to CrossFit where there's 15 of us in a class. There has to be a model there that works, but a lot of people are trying and experimenting, but we haven't one sort of take hold yet, I don't feel like.
Totally agree with that. And I think, Financial Peace University is awesome. I've taught it at my church, but I still have clients who have gone through Financial Peace and then they'll come to me and they'll say, I finally feel like I just understand my full financial situation and everything is accounted for and planned for, and I'm not missing something. And so there is it's hard to just eliminate completely that human element or that one-on-one or even one-to-many element where people can actually ask questions of an expert and really just, share their specific situation and get advice. And so again, I think it's somewhere in between. I don't know what that looks like exactly at this point.
As we're coming to a close, I'll ask you the final question. You've had a pretty diverse career, but you're seeing success in your financial planning firm. So if you could go back and talk to, younger Ben, maybe the Ben that was looking at starting a firm or even before then, if there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give yourself, that one thing you wish you had known then that you know now, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
It's a good question, Alan. I knew you were going to ask that question, and then I kind of forgot to think of my answer. But as I've just been thinking about that, I think one thing, maybe not back 10 years, but even just a couple of years ago, when I joined XYPN, just this idea of incorporating faith with my business is something I've been wrestling with for a long time, but not it's something I haven't talked with a lot of people necessarily about. And it was really interesting at the XY Planning Conference this past year. For some reason, it just kept coming up in conversations that I was having with people. And so it turned out there were, 25 of us that actually got together just to continue this conversation about how to incorporate, faith in your financial planning business. And so I think trying to start that conversation with other financial planners sooner is something that I would have done. And I think that leads for other listeners, whether it's faith-based financial planning or if it's something else, if there's a certain passion that you have, trying to communicate that to other people within the XY Planning community or within your larger community, because I think I've learned so much from the people that I've talked to as I've been kind of trying to do this a little bit on my own. And I've actually now gone through, there's a group called Kingdom Advisors that I've joined and just actually in the final process of going through their training as well. But yeah, so just, I guess, putting myself out there earlier and trying to connect with like-minded people who have similar passions, because I think we can all learn from each other and get better because of that.
Couldn't agree more. And like I said, it's hard to talk about some of those topics, and to just bring it up. But I do think there are if you're willing to talk about, there are a lot of other advisors out there that want to have that conversation, that are asking some of the same questions. You will probably hear from several advisors after this podcast goes live. And I would be remiss in saying that there's one more memory that I have that I can't pass up on sharing. And that is being at the Next Gen conference, the Next Gen Gathering Conference in 2014, right after we had launched XY. We had a handful of XYPN members there. We gave out our first round of XYPN t-shirts. So there was a little bit of XYPN versus the other advisors, which was not intentional. It just happened when half of the people were in our t-shirts. So we played a game of football. It was XYPN versus other. And I'll never forget, there was this sort of quiet guy that, one of our founding members that said, I can sort of throw a football. So we gave Ben the football, and I swear you could drop a football into a trash can at 50 yards. I've never played with someone who could throw like you can. And I remember we were just sort of running and the ball would end up in our hands. It was impossible to drop. So the moral of that story is, if you are ever in need of a quarterback, call Ben.
Well, thank you, Alan. I think that was the apex of my football playing career, the best I've ever played. So, that was really fun.
I love it. Well, thank you, Ben, for taking the time to come on the show and share your story. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Alan. Love being on the show.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.